Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to eMediaChat. It is January 9th already, 2013. A belated Happy New Year to everybody. Kirsten Rourke, right next to me. How are you?
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
It is going well. Yeah, can you believe it? We're already in 2013. And like we said in the pre-show, we've avoided the end of the world, the fiscal cliff, and that's all in 9 days. Man, what's next?
Our first show of the new year.
Yep, that's right. Well, anyway, and we've got a really good show starter. We've got somebody that we both met. I didn't have too much of a chance to interact with Kevin, but we were talking earlier in the show. I got there late to the session, so I missed, unfortunately, one of the best sessions. But Kirsten, would you like to introduce Kevin?
Yes, we have today Kevin Strohlmeyer. And just like Kevin, just when I introduced you at the event I did last May, we have this long string of things we could say about Kevin. So the abbreviated list, the list we can say in public is freelance professional, community professional, certified instructor, teacher, designer with 15 years experience. Just it goes on. And I am now, Kevin, I do like you, but I'm now completely I hate your guts because you are now assisting Dr. Brown at Adobe Max this year.
Oh,
and
interesting.
For that, I'm afraid I hate you now. I'm sorry.
Well, with us is Kevin Strohlmeyer. Welcome, Kevin. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
We're doing great.
So, what's new, Kirsten? You don't have George today.
No, I am without the ice pack, which is kind of awesome. One thing is odd. I'm on Justin TV, and I don't see us.
I see him.
Okay, let me refresh and see if I'm just being a little behind here. I was in the chat room there.
Maybe it got lost on that bridge.
I see a blinking live. Come on.
Maybe it got lost going to Cambridge.
Okay. There we go. That's better. George is in the freezer because I've done my PT for the day. I took my drugs. So I'm all good.
Oh, so this is going to be a fun chat.
Yeah. I'm no longer on oxycodone, so sorry, it won't be that much fun.
Oh gosh, they had you on the strong stuff, huh?
Well, they only for a little while, but they brought me into surgery. They moved my arm and said, "Oh, we can't do surgery. We have to do manipulation because your shoulder's frozen. So hold on." And while I was still awake, I heard it, and it sounded like granola being crunched. I was like,
that was one of the doctors saying, "Make a wish."
Yeah, yeah. So now I get to move it and do all sorts of stuff with it, and then go back.
Wow. So, well, hope you don't need that surgery, and they were able to loosen it up.
Well, we don't know. Nobody will tell me. Everybody's being careful.
Just be careful you don't go in for a shoulder thing and you wind up lobotomized. It happens a lot.
Oh, no,
Massachusetts is famous for that.
Written right here for 4 days because it was permanent ink. So no, they were very careful not to work on the wrong parts anymore. So.
I know. It is sort of scary. You go in for an eye surgery and they put a big X under your eye and it's like, do they really need that? Yeah, I guess they do.
They do. Because otherwise, you could come out and be like, I'm missing a limb.
That's right.
Oh, wait a minute. This was supposed to be an appendectomy. What happened to my arm? Yeah. No, this will be good. It's all good. I can get, I get much more. I'm getting there.
So Kevin, there's all sorts of new stuff going on with Adobe, and you were going to talk about something that happened with Touch apps.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the good stuff first.
Okay, good first.
Yeah, let's do the good stuff because that we could go on for a bit.
Happy time, then we get depressed. Okay.
Yes.
There is Creative Cloud, the Create Now piece with just all sorts of wonderful pieces, and we could talk about so much of it. But what would you like to focus on?
Actually, Photoshop was kind of the big thing that came out in the Create Now conference. Well, I shouldn't say conference, Create Now event. It was a one-day live event that Adobe hosted, and it was good. Scott Kelby was there. A lot of the different evangelists were there talking about different updates, interviewing people that were using Adobe products, and really what this has to do with this, it's all about Creative Cloud. So if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber, these are new updates that came out, I believe December 11th was the announced date. And Photoshop was the biggest one. They actually had a lot of updates, including things like exporting out conditional items for importing web color from the files, improving the styles if you're working with CSS, My favorite right now is conditional actions, where it's logic for your actions. So I'm using it a lot for web graphics. If I have something that I need to make for a blog 600 pixels wide, I can put a conditional action in saying if it's horizontal, make it 600 pixels wide. If it's vertical, in the past what would happen is it would still make it 600 pixels wide and it would be way too big for the blog.
Right.
Now you can put in a conditional action that says if it's vertical, make it so many pixels tall and only 300 pixels wide.
Oh, that's nice.
So it fits both width and height into consideration, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And a lot of other enhancements with 3D and things like that. So it was a really big boost in the arm, but it's only available for Creative Cloud subscribers, which is another added benefit of having Creative Cloud.
Yeah, they're making it so you pretty much need to be on cloud if you want to have, if you want to stay current, because the box stuff is coming out every year and a half.
Yeah.
And they're eventually going to kill it.
Was the old standby for product cycles. That may change, but nothing official has been coming out yet.
Yep. So what do you think as a designer and as a teacher? It's been such an amazing revolution with Creative Cloud coming out that now you can get your designs, you can share them with your clients, you can, put them into DPS, you can put them, web and print and all of this. As a designer, was it a new transition for you to think in terms of designing for all media? I'm assuming the answer is no. And as a teacher, what has it been like for your design students?
It was a little bit of a change. I've gone into the web kicking and screaming. Code makes my head hurt. But it really helps as a designer to kind of make yourself a more well-rounded designer. You're no longer a graphic designer. You're no longer a web designer. You're a designer. And what Creative Cloud and what CS6 allows you to do is to take your design and put it out to the web or put it out to print or bring it into Muse and create a site without coding. It really is a little bit more liberating than people think, because you don't have to go through and, oh great, now I have to design this for the web, so I have to completely start over and do this differently. Now you can actually just repurpose your existing designs and have it go to multiple sources. So as a teacher, it's a little bit of a curve for students because students that are familiar with print, they know terms like letter, legal, tabloid, PPI and DPI, CMYK, RGB, things like that in terms of print. But now you're talking about pixels and resolution and sRGB and, basically familiarizing them with the structure of designing for web and tablet and things like that, especially tablet these days. Even if you are a print designer only, you have to admit tablet is the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
So I know right offhand that an iPad 2 is 1024 by 768. That's the screen resolution or the size that I would be designed for. If I take an existing print piece and repurpose it for an iPad, I have to take that piece and fit it into there. Now, InDesign CS6 allows me to do that with liquid layout very easily, but it's just another, tool in my belt that I need to keep up with.
So I got a question for you about teaching again.
Yes.
I found that with my students, in the print universe would be kind of pushing the productivity of, do styles in advance so you can do production workflow. Now, you really need to be thinking about where you're going to end up before you really get into the design. How is that for your students? Because now they have to think in terms of where it's going to end up so that they can get the, kind of in advance everything together so they can really do production. I mean, styles and everything else. Mm-hmm. How has that been?
It's been a challenge. With a lot of design students, you have always thought in terms of how can I use this in a campaign or how can I take this to other medium and things like that. With our students, what we see a lot of is a lot more work in the concepting stage and the planning stage before you take it to execution, which has always been kind of a struggle for us because you have all this technology, and yes, you need to know the technology and you need to know the applications, but at the same time, you need to have a good sense of design. You need to have a good idea of where you're going. So road mapping is really important. You need to have a plan before you jump into this. Otherwise, you're just kind of hitting and missing. You're throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and it's not a really targeted way to go. Now, they're going through and they're concepting and they're thinking ahead of time, and it really is changing the way you think about it. Is this going to a tablet? Is this going on an iPhone? Is this going on an Android phone? Is this going on a website? Is it a mobile site? Is this print? Is this, so it's really expanded a lot of options, but it still comes down to the core design. It has to work in print. It has to work on a website. It has to work on a tablet. So it makes, I think, for a better design rather than designing a separate piece for this. And it kind of looks like it for a mobile device, but it really is separate. It really helps kind of flow things from point A to point B.
Now, Kevin, do you think that's going to cause the lowest common denominator design to show up versus good design? I always wonder about that. If all of, as a designer now, you've got to keep in mind other things that maybe you didn't have to worry about. And do you think that's just going to cause a lesser design happening with a lot of people versus better design?
I think it's going to be better design. I think, if you challenge somebody, hopefully they rise to the occasion and they don't just take the easy road out. The ones that succeed are good designs. The ones that fail are usually the ones that aren't as appealing visually. Really what we're talking about when we're talking about tablet design is interactive interfaces. We're talking about user experience. So if the user doesn't have a good experience with an app, obviously they aren't going to go back to it, or they're not going to purchase a full version of it, or they're going to give it a bad review. When it comes to a print piece, we should be thinking in the same way. If it's not visually appealing and it's not eye-catching and it's not engaging as a print piece, it's going to be a failure. People aren't going to enjoy it as much. People aren't going to think about it. People aren't going to recommend it. So it kind of transcends the media. It really comes back to it has to be a good design in order to succeed. If it's not going to succeed, and you're not going to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about Adobe Muse kind of bringing the InDesign folks into the web design framework?
I like Muse. I think it's the strongest effort that Adobe's put forward in recent years to design for the web without code. There's been several attempts prior that haven't gone very far, or in terms of Fireworks, everybody thinks this is the Fireworks killer. Fireworks has really kind of taken on a whole different role for prototyping and web design and asset development. That succeeds with that. Muse, however, succeeds as far as designing without code. I can go into Muse and very quickly, and like you said, InDesign is a really good point to bring up. It's very familiar to people. It has similar interfaces, has similar functionalities, and it makes sense to print designers. But I also like that Adobe's been very upfront about it, that this writes horrific code. If you're working with a developer and you plan on passing this over to a developer, you really don't want to start in Muse because the code works for the site, but it's not meant to be shared or cracked open and played with. So I think it's a benefit to designers, definitely, for those that don't know coding, that don't have HTML skills, things like that. It is a nice asset to have, but if you are planning on doing any kind of serious website development, Muse probably isn't for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is fun to work with, though. At least when you first get into it, it's not bad. And I keep bringing this up only because it reminds me so much of a tool that was out about 15 years ago called NetObjects Fusion. It looks like they almost took the whole front end of Fusion and said, "Here, now we have Muse." It's really close, and that was a long time ago. So I don't think they innovated with it as much as what they did is they took a good idea from years ago that just it's still out there. They've got over 1 million users supposedly, but I like it. I think it's nice. We developed the RELATECASTS website in Muse, but then recently we actually undid it from Muse and put it back into WordPress because we needed some plugins that we just couldn't get anywhere and didn't quite work as well with Muse. Well, they didn't because they were WordPress plugins. But to put the sites together took us less than a week, and it was pretty clean. It was nice and fun to work with. Our graphic artist really had a good time. Web designer, graphic artist, she had a really good time with it, and enjoyed it. And I love the flow charting capability. How you flow chart the site. It's very visual, very easy to figure out where everything is, and it just works. Now, Adobe years ago had was it called Go something or other?
Go live?
Go live. And I was okay. I'm surprised they killed it so quickly, but I thought it wasn't that bad.
And then we had Image Ready.
Image Ready,
and
yeah.
then Catalyst. And, there's been a few things over the years that they've tried.
Yeah, and they had one with Flash. Remember Scenes? Was it called Scenes? I think it was Flash Scenes.
I don't remember that.
Which was supposed to make your development in Flash more slide-based. That lasted less than a year.
Yeah.
It lasted about long enough for most people not to know it existed. We were really right on that. We started developing, it went away. It went, oh, geez.
Yeah, funny. Adobe never does that.
No, it's hard to believe. But,
You bringing out a product and killing it before it's a year old?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
After people start using it.
Yep. So before we get into any other topics like touch apps,
Yeah.
what about, I'm kind of one of those weirdos who I enjoy using Fireworks. I like it. Oh, I was late to the game, hideously late to the game, because I didn't teach it for years and thought it was not a product that had a lot of purpose until a student showed me what she was doing with it. And she was doing prototype work, and it made perfect sense to me.
Oh, yeah.
But it is so... It's like the ignored product of the Creative Suite.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't want to say it doesn't get the full support of Adobe, because it does. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a product anymore. But it's, for a lot of people, it's an afterthought, unfortunately. And it's surprising when we teach Photoshop. Excuse me. And we go through and we start talking about web assets. We bring up Fireworks and we talk about Fireworks as, even as used as a conversion from going from a Photoshop image to a JPEG. JPEG compression is actually much more effective coming from Fireworks than it is from Photoshop, even with the Save for Web command.
I thought even
so people are really
is too,
surprised
right?
when they see that. But then also, a lot of people, and I'm one of them, or used to be one of them, that would start designing in Photoshop, and I would comp up a mocked up site in Photoshop. But then if I wanted to show any kind of functionality or pages, I would take it over to Fireworks immediately. As soon as I'm done with the static design, I would take it over to Fireworks and translate it into that. And when you show people that, they're really surprised. They're like, God, where's this been? And it's funny because you can just say, well, it was installed on your computer with your Creative Suite. You probably just didn't know what the FW stood for.
Yeah.
And it really is a very powerful program, but it is kind of an afterthought for some people. And I know there's a few of my friends out there that are big on championing it and really push it forward. But it's always an uphill battle because people are so familiar with Photoshop, which is the flagship. But then, then there's Fireworks. So.
Well, Adobe's sort of funny, too, because if you look at it, the products that have had the most bugs and the most issues were all the old Macromedia products. And as they've been acquired and brought into the quote-unquote culture there, they still seem to have more problems in a lot of cases, or they're more ignored. So you get a little bit of that. It's been years now. I forgot what's it been, about 8-9 years since they got acquired? I don't remember.
Square peg round hole.
Yep. Yep.
The big thing is CS6 is the first product cycle. What was explained to us was this is the first product cycle where they've been able to spend the entire product development cycle actually developing and working on the products themselves. With previous versions, they purchased Macromedia in the middle of the production cycle. So the very first version of the Macromedia products available in Creative Suite were basically through half a development cycle. Mm-hmm. And then the next version, we had the whole Apple update with the programming language and everything, so they had to concentrate on that. And then we had 0.5, where they brought out EPUB and those kind of things with mobile devices. And now finally with CS6, you're seeing what happens when they actually can concentrate on doing nothing but product development and bug fixes and things like that. You really get a more stable product, a better product, a lot more features, and it's been, I think, very well deserved.
Yeah, I was really thrilled with the Photoshop team. made a point of putting out some amazing videos that showed all of the consumer feedback, all of the designer feedback that had been sent in the previous year, and a whole list of, here's what you wanted this, we did this, you wanted this, we did this, and this whole giant list of here's things you asked for. And it was wonderful because it was like, okay, good. You're listening to how people are using the product, you're listening to feature requests in even a broader way than ever before, and making it part of your marketing. Thank you. Because it's, the idea of yes, we are hearing you is a really good message.
Yeah, and I think that's overall for Adobe as a company, they are very receptive to consumer feedback and input from users and other people. A good case in point is their Facebook pages for all the products. The Facebook pages for the products are run by a social media team, but it's in direct coordination with the product managers, with the production team, with engineers. So when you see things posted up on Facebook, like sneak peeks before CS6 was launched, Brian O'Neill Hughes, who's the senior product manager for Photoshop, was posting up these little YouTube clips of new features that were coming out in CS6 for Photoshop months before the product actually came out, which was great. It was hard for us because when you're presenting, it's like, hey, I want to show you this new feature, but you guys have already seen it all over YouTube. So, but it's great because it really kind of engages with the consumer. It really makes it a better product because you do get feedback. And also, Adobe has their product feedback directly in the software itself. So if you participate in that program, you are helping develop a better product. A case in point is with CS6 and Photoshop. If you look at CS5 Liquify under the filters panel, and you go and you look at Liquify CS6, it's much more streamlined. There's fewer tools. They've kind of taken the advanced features and compacted them, because what they did was they looked at a heat map of what features people were using and not using inside of Liquify, and they found that a lot of people weren't using certain functions in it. So they just got rid of it. And it's been well received. One of the things that I used was removed, so I'm hoping that they bring it back. But it really is a direct result of user feedback. So that was really nice to see.
Now
do we talk about the big gorilla now?
Yeah, we got about 15 minutes left,
Sure.
So we should probably hit the more. We went through happy now. Now let's go
We
back
went through
to sad.
happy, so now let's talk about what's happened recently. So just before the holiday break, the Touch Apps team posted a blog post stating that effective immediately, they were no longer offering any of the Touch apps except for Photoshop Touch on Android devices and Photoshop Touch and Adobe Ideas on Apple devices. And it kind of was, I wouldn't say swept under the rug, but it was kind of just quietly released. And our friend Pariah actually put out the alert, put an open letter out to Adobe saying, hey, why have you done this? And Kirsten, you did the same thing where you went through and put out a very well written, not bashing Adobe, but just asking valid questions. Why were these killed so quickly? And it brought up a lot of good points, and I've brought up some points as well. The nice thing is Adobe is listening. They have given a response on their blog saying that they're aware that some people are unhappy with this. Well, most people are. But that they're working on something better and hope to come out with something soon that people will enjoy. But there were some valid questions. Like you said, these have been out for less than a year.
Right, and people paid for them. These were not. Some of them weren't cheap as far as apps go. I think they were $10, $20.
Everything was $9.99.
$9.99.
Now for Photoshop Touch, that's a good value. There's a lot that you can do with it, and even with Ideas, with the enhanced features with layers and everything like that, it was okay at $9.99. But things like Proto Cooler, which Cooler was nothing more than another interface for what you could get on your desktop, or the Cooler app on your desktop, for $9.99 was a little steep, in my opinion. And then you had Review, Collage, things like that, which they were very niche. The market probably wasn't as big and as widely accepted as Photoshop. I mean, Photoshop
now,
is...
Kevin, I've got to ask you something.
Yeah.
Cooler was a pretty nice product, but Adobe never actually used it in their own design. You could tell because some of their design color schemes were just bizarre. But I used to just kind of shake my head and go, I know they have this product and they try to tell people, here's some good design, but they've never used it.
Yeah, I use Cooler a lot, and I always like it because Cooler's now available in InDesign and in Illustrator, and I believe there's a Cooler extension now that you can get for Photoshop. But I really like it where you can go through and I show that to students, and they enjoy it because it does kind of, especially with the Illustrator, where you have the color guide in Illustrator, so you can do color relationships, analogous, monochromatic, things like that. But yeah, there's some things where you just kind of look and you're like, wait, you've got this really cool product, why aren't you using it? You see that, and even with, there's always the running joke that, Microsoft developers are using iPads and things like that. You see that with a lot of companies.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, what I found odd was Proto, I think, was a little overpriced for what it did, but I loved the fact that it seemed to me a great way to have somebody be able to do sort of a quick mock-up, throw it into Dreamweaver, hand it off to somebody who could, who would work in the Dreamweaver interface and make that transition easier.
Yeah.
And it's gone.
I like Proto was my third favorite app. Obviously, I really like Photoshop Touch and Adobe Ideas, and I use them, pretty much on an, if not every day, a weekly basis. But Proto I was really in love with, and thought for me as a designer, it was a great asset because I actually wrote an article in October about using touch apps for Adobe. So back then they were still on board with it. But my workflow used to be to go through and hand sketch everything. So I would come up with a sketch talking to a client, okay, you want to put a banner across the top, and then over here you want to put a video, and here you want to do something else. So I'm sketching it by hand just on some paper, and then I would develop the assets, and then I would hand both things off to the developer and go, here's all my junk, make it work. And going through and doing that with Proto, I was able to give them a really nice, clean wireframe where they could go through and say, okay, here's my assets, but here's also a wireframe of what I'm thinking. And it would at least give them a launching point, a starting off point where they could go through and say, okay, I get what you're saying here. Some div tags, I've got some video assets, I can use this to start, but I'm going to build on top of it. It was never meant to be a final product. I mean, that's the whole point of the name. It's prototype.
Yeah.
The set, I really thought out of all of them, Proto had the biggest shot of surviving because Proto was the next one that they released on the iPad. The only three apps that were available on the iPad were Photoshop Touch, which was the first one to come out of the new ones. Ideas had been out for a number of years. But Photoshop Touch and then Proto came out the same time as CS6. So when we were talking about how some of these weren't available for even a year, in terms of iPad, Proto had been out for a little over 6 months when they had made the decision to end of life with it.
Yeah.
But for the other ones, they hadn't even released them on the iPad yet, and I think that was a huge fail on their part to not give that a chance for the other apps to see how they do, because as much as you look, the iPad is a little more than 50% of the market share. Actually, I think the new numbers came out, and for the first time, it's a little less than 50% of the market share for tablets.
Oh, it's dropped that much?
But it's still a huge chunk of your market. And how can you, of course, things are going to show poor sales and poor feedback because it's only available on an Android device. And you don't have it on the, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is, the huge market share.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I found frustrating, and I put this in the blog post you mentioned, is you wrote in October on Adobe Aspire magazine about your workflow. In December, in Adobe Inspire magazine, they featured Proto. Right. And that same month, now admittedly the article was written beforehand, the same month, they kill it. Yeah. And it was scream-inducing for me.
But that's typical Adobe because one side doesn't know what the other side's doing.
Right.
Let me tell you a story I heard yesterday, which just left me mind-boggled. Well, I think I've told you guys about the time when we were working in the Adobe booth for the e-learning and Connect group, and they laid off 80% of the people working the booth. Now, we were external, so we were there. We both worked 10-hour days for 2 days because nobody else was there. And then they laid off, I think, 5 other people who were supposed to work in the booth. Okay, fine. But they also laid off the booth because the booth never showed up for the actual show. So we look really tacky. Here's Adobe with no booth. But I was talking to one of the people at LA County, big county. I mean, this is a huge county. And what they did was they had a big major class going on live cycle. First day, the teacher shows up. Second day, no teacher. He had gotten laid off, and they told him, don't show up anymore. So if you do this to a client, that's insane. So they do a lot of weird things like that. So getting rid of apps, I guess, is probably just easy for them. Either that or they use them as public offerings. Hey, let's put out an app. People pay $1 million, and then we stop it. Hey, we just made a quick $1 million. I don't know. I don't know what they really think. But those are really bizarre behaviors for a company that size, who's always been pretty corporate, acting rather foolish.
Well, in their defense for the apps,
Yeah.
the only reasoning, I mean, Adobe does do a lot of trial and error. I mean, they have to be innovative. They have to keep trying new things. And some of those things are not going to be successful. I mean, obviously. But I think in recent times, the way that they've handled it has really reflected worse on them than the actual act of removing the apps.
Right.
One of the biggest things that I've seen that people are complaining about right now is the fact that not only did they remove the apps, but they also removed the plug to communicate with the desktop apps.
Oh.
So you have Proto right now, and for some reason you need to reformat your drive, or if you want to put it on someone else's drive so that they can open up your Proto files, you don't have access to the plugins anymore to communicate with Dreamweaver.
So you're done. So basically it's dead.
Yeah, so they said that they're going to continue to support it on the forums and stuff, but as far as supporting it doesn't cost anything to host it on your website. I mean, it does, but compared to having a team working on something, I don't know why they didn't still continue to offer this until it's out of sync with updates. So if Apple updates their iOS or Android updates their operating system, and it's something that's no longer available, then that's it. Then it's done. But to suddenly just one day decide yank it without any notice, especially for the users that just paid $9.99 for this.
Yeah, they're not thinking ahead of the repercussions of the action. I agree. Products come and go. They die. But they die really quickly at Adobe sometimes, and they don't give people a chance, like you said, adapt.
Right.
I just wish that they had set aside, a small team of people that would be able to keep it alive enough that when they came out with something new, they could say, okay, we are killing this, but here's the replacement for it. Because the message right now is, we have something in the works, trust us. Only, I love Adobe dearly. So it's sort of a relationship where it's like, I love you dearly and you're making me nuts. You're asking for trust after you just blew people's trust.
Of course, on the other hand, you know what? It is a San Francisco and San Jose mindset. The end of the world was coming. Why not just kill the apps? It doesn't matter.
Oh, so you're blaming the Mayans
it's
for the
Mayans.
Adobe Touch
It's
apps.
all their fault.
I like that. I like that. Can we tell Adobe to use that?
I
It's
think
not our
that's a
fault,
good one. It's the Mayans. But it just dawned on me. That's why they killed it right when they did. Nobody would notice anyway. We're all dead.
Well, I mean, I understand we're done with this. We want to move in a new direction. I actually do totally get that. What just kills me is the tone-deaf response a little bit is, in my case, I'm one of the few professional trainers I know that didn't get bitten hard by this because I haven't been demoing touch apps in the field the way you guys have. I mean,
now somebody like
and Sally
Hannah
and
is
you
probably,
guys, Kevin, you guys have been out there, and I'm doing some small stuff on my own, but I wasn't, traveling doing this, and then all of a sudden, oops.
Right.
And for me, it's like, you can't, you got to not treat your trainers like this.
Well, and it's not necessarily even just the trainers; it's the users. When you see someone at a conference, or if you see someone at an event, and they're like, "Hey, Adobe's got this new product. Adobe's got this new feature. We've got this really cool, shiny new thing." People are going to hesitate. They're not going to be early adopters. They're not going to. So you've kind of caused the issue that It's circular. You've caused the issue that you're trying to avoid by killing the app so quickly, and having a trust issue with new users. It's going to be cyclical now because they're not going to trust you when the new product comes out, and so you're going to come back and say, well, nobody adopted this.
Right.
Nobody got this within the first 6 months. Well, it's because they're hesitant to pull the trigger on something. When you pull, you yank the rug out from under them so quickly, why would they want to do that? So it's a learning experience, I hope, for Adobe. They are reading the feedback that they're getting. They are responding to a lot of it, which is good. And hopefully
Cross
something
fingers.
good does come out of this.
And it's not, this isn't Adobe only. A lot of companies do this. What kills me is you have this very strong community that really could, they could have gotten advance feedback that this would have gone over badly. Mm-hmm. And I'm not quite sure why they didn't know that, because it's not like the community doesn't have a loud voice.
Right.
So it seems to me obvious that if they had touched base a little bit and put feelers out in the community, they would have gotten back a "that will bite you" message.
Yeah, but it was end of the world. Remember that.
That's true. It is the Mayans' fault.
It was their fault.
But it's not. It's not just Adobe. A lot of companies, I don't know that they understand that.
But Adobe's notorious for that. Even Microsoft has done that. And hey, Microsoft killed Microsoft Flight Simulator, which had millions of happy users, even though they hadn't had a new version in 4 years, and they didn't care. There was a third-party community of thousands of developers for that, and they're still developing. They're just using a 5-year-old version already. Kind of odd, but that's Microsoft. Microsoft and Adobe share a lot of similarities that way.
Well,
you like this product? Let's kill it.
I think it's all big companies, and it's kind of a pity, because I wrote in my post that I have, with only 2 actual exceptions, haven't met anybody at Adobe that I don't think the world of. Mm-hmm. But the company itself sometimes makes me want to drink. So it's sort of this disconnect.
Well, it's gotten very big, and there's a lot of employees, on any given day. And then sometimes there's less, sometimes there's more. But yeah, they go through that. Well, we are at 45 minutes, so we're basically at the end of the show. Kevin, you've got to come back.
Yeah, definitely.
And share more with us, and because you've got a wealth of knowledge, and it'd be great to have you back on. And,
cool.
It's not all bad. I mean, we still have Photoshop Touch, which is really a great app. And I haven't really used Ideas much, but I have it. I just haven't used it much.
Kevin, do you want to come back and show Ideas for us?
That'd be cool.
Sure. Yeah. Han and I can tag team.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. That'd be great.
That's cool. That would be absolutely great. And Kevin, any place you're going to be presenting or at in the near future?
Yeah, a couple places. I'm going to be in San Diego in March for the Adobe Camp. I believe. Let me check my calendar here. That is March 14th and 15th. Okay. I'm going to be in San Diego for that. And then the next month is Photoshop World down in Orlando. So photoshopworld.com. I'm going to be out there for that, running the live blog as always.
Great.
And then the next month is Adobe Max, which is the huge national Adobe Worldwide Conference.
Yes. And I will see you there.
Yes, and I'm going to be, like you said before, I'm going to be helping out Russell Brown at Max, which is the 3-day pre-con.
That'll be cool.
I believe it's sold out already, but if not, go to max.adobe.com and check it out.
Is that in LA this year? Where is it this year?
Yeah, it's LA.
It is LA. Okay, good. Yep. Well, hey, I'll definitely have to get together. We're close.
And then you're also going to be in Boston, I believe.
Boston, June, first week in June.
Yes.
So.
Yep.
Sounds great.
With nobody I know, but
no, not at all. You'll be all alone, like an orphan.
Well, have fun at all those events. You'll probably be on here before all those events happen. So
great.
We look forward to seeing you soon. If you're in the chat room, thanks for being there. Actually, we never asked the chat room anything today, did we?
No, I put out little noises.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep.
Melanie's there. Hi, Melanie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember Melanie from the camp.
I do. She's been at our company 20 years. I saw her post.
Yeah, she started when she was 3.
3, that's what I told her, I think, yeah. She doesn't look anywhere near her age.
Rick does not violate any child labor laws.
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
No.
Oh, I'm really glad you could make it, Kevin. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks. A good one, Kevin. We appreciate it. And Kirsten, we'll see you next week on eMediaChat. Have a good one, everyone. Take care. Thanks. And...